Hi, my name is Tommy, and this is TommithTalks. I'm here today with Paulie Wrongthoughts. Hey, Paulie, do you want to introduce yourself and let everybody know what we're talking about today?
Hey, Tommy, and hey, YouTube. Today we are going to be discussing our thoughts on the coronavirus and corporate evolution. So I'm having this internal thought, right? I was having a conversation with a friend the other day, and we were talking about vaccines, and I was saying, being vaccinated is not a personality, but neither is being unvaccinated. I think that's the big problem right now, is that these things have become like personalities, right? Like particularly over here, if you're like a more left-leaning individual, then you need to be vaccinated and you need everyone to be vaccinated. And if you're a right-leaning individual, you either don't need everyone to be vaccinated or you don't think anyone should be vaccinated.
Okay, so before you start,
right.
Where do you sit? Where's your line?
So here's the thing. I took my first vax yesterday. And the reason I did that is I'm actually still pretty skeptical. It was not like something I really wanted to do, and it's not something I think is necessarily going to pay off, right, for me or like anyone around me, to be honest. But here's how I looked at it. I'm still skeptical. My hard line to answer your question is nobody should be forced to take it in any context. So like if you want to go to school right now, you have to get like measles, mumps, rubella, all that. So there's room for that in my book. It's got to go through the motions, right? Like they would have to remove and this is all American, but they'd have to remove the executive use. They would have to actually formally approve these drugs.
So just hear me out for a second on that point only. Those things became so rife in the community that they forced it in schools at a young age for you to get vaccinated against. So the MMR jab, even in the UK, is a huge thing. Pretty much every kid in the UK gets it. Now, I think you can opt out as a parent or guardian, but unless you do so, they will be getting it, essentially.
Yep.
What makes that different to COVID?
You know what? Actually, you have a point, because at the time it would have been apples to apples, right? Especially when you consider the difference in times, right?
They would have had no information about what these infections were. They probably would have had to quickly come up with some form of solution to reduce the amount of infection. So they've come up with, a vaccination, and then they forced it into schools to make sure that the population going forward isn't hit with such a huge wave.
So there's two things that I think are different. One, like I said, I will leave room for the argument that like the places that it already exists, like school and travel and things like that, it lends itself more to those conversations. But when you get to the places like Australia, for example, the vaccinated individuals are allowed, 1 hour of outdoor recreation every day right now, things like that.
Didn't they just go into lockdown for like one case or something?
Yeah, one case, yeah.
Jeez.
And they're building quarantine camps on like the outskirts of town and everything, right?
Like for me, that sounds, I'm like, to be honest, I'm a very pro-vaxxer. I think there are a lot of people in this world that are vulnerable, and therefore everyone having their vaccination is at least contributing to a society of trying to keep everybody safe. But one person getting coronavirus and they shut down the whole country just seems a little bit too extreme.
Well, yeah, for sure. And so for me, the reason that I decided I was going to do it is back home, I was in a scenario where there were 6 or more hospitals within 20 minutes of me, right, in any direction. And I was directly connected with doctors that worked in those ERs and ICUs. I could have direct admission if I needed it, right? Between the fact that I have much less accessible healthcare, and RightThink is currently working with children at like a kindergarten, I was like, okay, that might be a good reason to consider this.
Sure. So you've done it out of necessity than anything else.
Right. Exclude that, I live in an area where like they don't wear masks around here. And to be fair, I don't wear masks. Like I didn't bring a mask down here with me. Because
you do know they're only like a couple of dollars at the store, right?
Yes,
Okay, just checking.
100%.
Just checking. I can't wear one. I didn't bring one with me. I'm like, just go to the shop.
It's the exact opposite of what I was in New York, right? In New York, I was surrounded by a population that was obsessive to a fault in my degree, right?
Okay.
With this idea of like, you can eradicate it, you can beat it, you can get rid of it, all these things. And now I am in a place which is the exact opposite, which I'm more comfortable in. However, like the risk level does go up.
See, I'm double jabbed. So I've been double jabbed now for almost 2, maybe 3 weeks. And work have just emailed recently to say that everyone's going back into the office. I kind of feel a bit more ease about that. I think there's personal things where I'm like, I don't really want to go back into the office. I really enjoy working from home. But here we go, back into the office, 1st of September. But I'm also kind of conscious that not everybody has been double jabbed. So not everyone is in a position.
Well, and to clarify 2 points there, one of the reasons that I'm so hesitant about, or have been so hesitant about the vaccine, and I still, like, to be honest, I have a lot of, like, we'll call it buyer's remorse, right?
Can you feel it inside your body? Is it crawling around you now, Paulie? That's it. Have you got the little COVID bug inside you? Does it make you feel bad?
I've just violated my ethics.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, this was just something, this was a hill that I've been dying on for some time now. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So that being said, one of the reasons for that is that I do know that, like, you could be double or triple jabbed, for that matter, and still carry and still shed the virus. So it doesn't. Yeah.
Is the misconception of getting a jab is you can still get it, you can still be poorly from it, but what the hope is that it doesn't make you poorly enough that you are going to end up in hospital and take up resources. And that's the key point, I think, that a lot of people forget. Get double jabbed. Yes, you will potentially still get coronavirus, but hopefully it knocks you out for a day or two versus knocking you out for a week or more on a ventilator inside a very expensive hospital. And I think that's kind of where I sit personally.
Okay, so you're concerned, like, for going back into the office, say, but not necessarily everyone has gotten their second dose, right?
Exactly.
So your concern is actually external, right? You don't want to, say, carry the virus, be fine because you're double vaxxed, but pass it on to them.
Exactly. Plus, I still live with my parents. They're not young. Every day that I leave this house, and I still go out and think I still restrict myself more than I should do, but I kind of consciously do it in their kind of favor, knowing they're a bit older. A tube into work, every time I go into an office full of 100 people, is every day that I put myself and who I live with at risk. Do we have to live like this forever? No, I don't think we do, but it took us almost 3 or 4 years just to get over SARS. So they're just trying to get people back to norm, I think, just a little bit too quickly.
So here's my problem with it all, right, is that I'm actually much less skeptical of the vaccine itself. I'm not worried that the, knock on wood, I'm not worried that the vaccine's gonna, like, kill me. I'm still not putting myself in any position where it's like, well, if you're vaccinated, you can come in or something. Like, no, I'll just hang out with the unvaccinated folk, honestly, because that's my issue here is, like, honestly, if Right Think wasn't working with children, I still wouldn't have gotten it. I would have been like, I work at home. Like, I literally never go outside. And when I do, it's pretty damn controlled. Like, I don't necessarily have to worry about it.
I'm double jabbed and I still control myself heavily.
I don't wear a mask down here, and, like, things haven't changed a whole lot down here. So, like, we went to a flea market last weekend that was packed, like, wall to wall, you know what I mean, indoor and out. And, like, nobody's wearing masks, nobody's worried about it, nobody's asking anybody about vaccines or anything.
But does that worry you, or do you not mind?
No, I like that. I like that.
It. Okay,
like,
interesting.
That's like intrinsically part of why I moved down here. Like,
see, I went to a theater the other night, and it was the first time I've seen the theater, like, packed, like, absolutely packed. And I'm not gonna lie, for the first, like, 20-30 minutes, I was really anxious. Now, obviously, once the theatre production got going, that kind of took my mind off a lot of things, and I did really enjoy myself. But they definitely got to a point when I first kind of walked into the room thinking, oh, I don't know if I like this.
So when I went back to work last year, it was in a building full of sick people, my first exposure to being back in like crowded scenarios was last year, when it was still like summer of last year, when still kind of going off the walls, and it was buildings full of people that were all sick, like waiting to see their doctor. So to be fair, I got that, like I was anxious at that point in time, right? But I also have had a year, and now I'm at the point where I'm like, I kind of want to be treated like an adult, right? And if I want to go to the flea market and buy some fresh produce, not wear a mask along with like everybody else, I do want that option. And there are people there, there are people there wearing masks and stuff. And like, that's the thing though. Nobody's barking at each other about whether they are or are not.
It's a choice, yeah. And
You
I understand that. And when I was out the other week, it was about 50-50 in London. Half the population wandering around with masks on and the other half not. And there are certainly situations where I'm fine. So like, I'll be walking down the street, my mask will come off. If it's open and airy, then I probably won't end up putting my mask on. But as soon as I go into somewhere that's a little bit more confined and I feel myself near people in a confined space, then I have this kind of like knee-jerk reaction to want to put my mask on. Even though I know that me putting my mask on isn't actually protecting me, because your mask is effectively about you protecting others. That's how it's meant to work. But yet I put it on as a kind of a instinct or feeling that I'm safe. How backward is that?
Well, and that's
Like
kind of where
people feel like that.
I think they do, right? Like I wore my mask everywhere, and then one day when I really thought about like the exact words you just said, like how backwards is that?
What's annoyed me throughout the last 18 months is that the message has always changed. So 1 minute things are okay, 1 minute things are not okay, 1 minute you can do this, 1 minute you can't do that. And it's like they've never found like a consistent message. And even though we're adult enough and bright enough to make our own decisions, as long as we are keeping our own personal distance, we're probably going to be fine. It's just that knowledge in your head that you've just got all these different messages going round and round and round.
Because you're right, like one standard message is all that was needed here to prevent a lot of this.
I got this kind of sense of feeling that it was going to be huge, which it was. And I kind of wanted to be near family. And at the time I wasn't. So it was a really like weird, humbling sensation, because every day, if you said, oh, when do you go and see your parents? I probably would have said back in the day, oh, like every other week, maybe every 3 weeks. But it was just weird that when something bad was happening, my first instinct was like, right, got to go back home. I need to make sure they're okay. So it was a really weird feeling, because anyone who knows me, I'm quite cold-hearted at times. I'm just like, whatever. So it was nice to know that I was still human inside, and that.
And I thought that was going to be like a global experience, to be honest. At the time, I was like, this is gonna humble a lot of people, right? Because I felt, like I was in contact with my parents more at the start of that and like throughout it than I have been in years, right? And I live pretty close to them. I find very quickly that they're afraid of something, right? They're afraid of what that vaccine's going to do to them. They're afraid of what COVID's going to do to them. They're afraid of what people are going to think if they get vaccinated, or what people are going to think if they don't get vaccinated. All this unnecessary pressure has been put on to something that is naturally scary, right? Like an unknown, a novel virus ripping around the world is naturally scary. But it gets to a point where we say, we have vaccines, we know the percentage of efficacy, right? We have masks, we know the percentage of efficacy. It's time to really focus in on encouraging everyone to still feel like they're teetering on the edge of something, because I really don't think it's the case that we're teetering on the edge anymore.
So do you think then it is fair for companies to be like, right, back to work, let's go?
I mean, ultimately, yes. Here's my opinion. I think that the government should not have been able to tell people that they could not work.
And do you think now then, with what's going on, do you think it's right for people to stand up to say, actually, no, I don't want to go back to work just yet? I'm sure there are many jobs out there that physically need someone on site.
I do think this much, and I don't think the government should have any role in this, but I think any smart corporation would. If your argument is that it's still not safe, like it's never ever you're shooting towards a goalpost that is moving like a jet plane. Like you're not gonna get there. You've gotta man up at some point. And I mean that as nicely as I can, right? But like there's hospital workers that have been working through this that are not like dropping dead on the scene, you know. And I'm not
Yeah.
saying that some haven't, but I'm just saying like I don't things like that have a leg to stand on when they say like it's still too dangerous. Like I just don't think so. But if your argument is one that the global workplace has changed, then I agree 100%. And that's, you know, as you know, I've been making that argument for months now. Like, there's absolutely no realistic need
If
organization
it
can give me in
allows
my
you to
role.
do it, there
Yeah.
should be the option to do it.
Yes, 100%, and
I agree with
not
that.
just because of COVID, just in general. This is unfortunately something that was forced on the world, right? Like you forced the world to figure out how to work from home. The reality is you taught the world how to work from home,
Yeah.
and now you can't
And
put that
companies
genie
have put
back in the bottle.
and companies have put infrastructure in. I know that a company that I work for gave bursaries for people to physically buy their own equipment to have at home. So in my head,
We
I'm like, why would you go through all that effort if you then are not going to go and put a working from home policy in place? Now, they've
we
openly said they're working on one, but it's not really going to come into place until April next year, by which then people could be back out of rhythm again.
so you're going to spend all of that money and then bring everybody back? Like it doesn't make sense.
So it'll be interesting to see what companies do going forward. I think it's going to take a lot of people some time to really adjust back to normal life. You know, I think people will start to enjoy it more, and seeing your friends again and your work colleagues, however much some work colleagues probably wind me up the wall. Actually, there's kind of a weird kind of familiarity that you kind of get when you see these people day in and day out. That is actually hard to explain, but it gives you purpose. That's how I feel. So that's why I'm not necessarily against going back into the office. I just wish companies would allow their staff just to have a bit of flexibility. I think that's my key message. I think going back to the office or going back into work is not bad. You shouldn't be afraid, but give your staff the choice and the option to be free. Companies, unfortunately, are getting to the point where they're not expanding with the work because they've lost so much money. So then those people that are working for them already are having to do 2-3 men jobs. So actually, I feel like the flexibility will be even more important for these people because they're going to be under so much pressure. I don't know, maybe I'm just young and dumb and forget that everyone's done this before me. You know, worked tireless jobs to feed kids at the table, and maybe I'm just in a generation where we just feel like we want to speak out about it.
I think a lot of the people, at least that I know personally, when they're like, I don't want to go back to work and, you know, it's unsafe and I don't want to send my kids back to school, like it's unsafe and, you know, blah, blah, blah. I can look at it objectively and be like, I think you don't want to separate yourself, right? Because
Anymore.
for
Yeah,
once, you got to actually experience time with your child,
exactly.
right?
So it's
And
not
yeah, it
actually
was
about not wanting to go back to work anymore. It's about not wanting to lose the connections that we've all just built over a year and a
right.
half. A lot of those are with your own family, which is crazy saying, but how have we got to that point in society where all of us have completely abandoned our family values, and it takes a bloody pandemic to get us all back in line again? Do you know
Right.
what I mean? I'm just like, maybe that was the world telling us we'd all made a big mistake.
Right. And I honestly, you know, like that doesn't sound all that unreasonable to me. Something had to give there, and hopefully this does that, because I do think that having parents and children together and just families together more as a result of this
Yep.
could have some really good like social outcomes
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really important to take away from today's message, that no matter how we feel, no matter what governments have put in place, that actually over the last 18 months we've managed to experience something that we would have never experienced without coronavirus. And so with all that bad, there kind of is a bit of a positive that's come out of this. Well, Paulie, I think we are just about time now on today's podcast. So I just wanted to thank you very much for joining me and for all your input today. It's been really nice to have you on the show.
Thanks, Tommy, for having me on the show. Hopefully we can do this again sometime soon.
And listeners, if you want to be part of the conversation, then don't forget to like and subscribe to these videos and leave your comments down below.